Hey, all geeks, gamers, and everything in between. My name's Bailey.
I'm McKenna.
And I'm Kaden, and welcome to the Hyperfixnation podcast,
where we talk movies, video games, and TV.
So join us and let's get into it.
Tonight, on the Hyperfixnation podcast, we have a very special guest. Our actual high school film teacher, Trenton McGregor. A very nice fellow. Now let's get into it, shall we? Alright, welcome everybody to the Hyperfixnation podcast with my co-host that you've already heard about from our intro, Bailey, McKenna. I'm Kaden, and we have a special guest here today. For those of you listening, this is all of our actual high school video and film teacher, and he's also the coolest teacher I've had ever.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean it.
Oh, stop. You're too kind. I love what you guys are doing, and I support all of you all the time, so.
Thank you.
Aww.
To start with, we wanted to ask you a few questions kind of about your history with movies, like, do you have a favorite director?
Ooh. Well, the answer to that question may make you very angry, Kaden.
I knew it. I knew it was going to be him.
So, here's my full answer. I think that from a long-term perspective, and if I'm advising someone to watch films that will get them into film, I would recommend Spielberg.
Yeah.
It's so hard to beat Spielberg.
That's a very good starter one.
Not War of the Worlds, though.
Yeah, well, you pick his good ones, right? I mean, even if it's E.T., which is incredible, but not his best. Anyway, as far as my current favorite director, before Thor: Love and Thunder came out, I might have said Taika Waititi.
Yeah.
I find that funny because I was the same way. I can't pick one favorite, but Taika was in the rotation for favorite.
Well, let me elaborate. I think Taika Waititi is still an incredible director. I think he got handcuffed by Disney on that one.
I agree.
I think that if you doubt how good Taika Waititi is, I'm going to tell you to go back in time, all you listener, and go watch Hunt for the Wilder People, because that is an incredible film. Go watch that, and you'll know Taika Waititi is amazing.
And if you think his movies aren't funny because Thor: Love and Thunder was not very funny, just watch What We Do in the Shadows, because that still is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen.
Great concept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the answer currently is actually I really, really, really enjoy Denis Villeneuve. I really do.
I knew you were gonna say that because I remember in class when the Dune trailer first came out, you're like, "Hey, come here, come watch this," and I never saw the movie.
That's fair.
I remember that slightly as well. Yeah.
I didn't want to.
I can try to sell you on Dune if you're interested, but I also, if you're not interested, then I won't try.
I specifically was like, it seems too long. Isn't it 3 hours? I say that. But then I saw the Batman 4 times in theaters, so I really...
That's true.
We can talk about it if you want.
Actually, I would like to ask a question, possible.
Yeah.
If there's any specific reason as to why you like Denis Villeneuve's movies, I would like to hear that.
Yeah, well, I'd say at least partially, I really actually enjoy the slow, contemplative film, which is partially why I'm really excited to talk about the film that we're going to talk about today, because this is, to a T, that's the type of film this is. I love slow movies. And as a great example, I remember one of my first movies I ever fell in love with was one that I watched with my dad called The Great Escape. I told you guys about this before in class.
I've heard about that one.
I remember, yeah.
And if you ever want to watch a great old World War II romp that actually is much more than just a romp, it's thoughtful and poignant, and you really care about these people in the movie. Great. I can't recommend The Great Escape enough, but it's slow and it takes its time. So that's the type of movie that I generally love. And Denis Villeneuve generally does a great job of keeping people engaged in the film while still keeping the slow pace that really lets you slow down and think about what he's trying and what the actors are trying and what all, not just him, but the entire movie set, everybody's working to try and show you with the themes of the movie. I've always been impressed with him for that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Which I definitely got in Prisoners. That one, I was hesitant because it's 2.5 hours. It sounds like I have a lot of problem with time for movies, but I was like, this is going to be boring. But then the time just flew by because I was like, oh, I'm completely invested.
Yeah, it keeps you pulled in.
Yeah.
Okay, McKenna, it's your turn to ask me a question.
My turn.
Yeah.
Okay. What got you into movies and film?
It's a good question. So, I mean, there's a couple things I could point to, but I mean, one, I feel like movies are intrinsically baked into American culture. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's very difficult to be an
Yeah.
American and not enjoy movies. It's so much a part of who we are as Americans.
Yeah.
Very
And-
true, yeah.
So there's that as a baseline. But another big one is when I was in high school, I had some guys at school that I really looked up to. I thought they were just the funniest guys on the planet. And they made their own films outside of class for fun. They didn't even do it for school. They just made their own stupid, funny films. And I was enthralled with how hilarious they were at the time. It was high school humor, so they're not so funny anymore.
Well, of course, yeah.
But some of those guys went on to go, and they went to film school, and I was just always super impressed. And I think film is just one of the best ways to tell stories nowadays.
So I have a question.
Okay.
This is probably like the hardest question you can ask a film person. Do you have a favorite movie of all time? Like number one, like favoritist favorite?
Period, end of sentence. Yeah, it's so hard to give just one answer. I could throw out 5, but just one.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you can't throw out a single one, I would say top 5 would be good.
Tell you what, I'll give you an uncontroversial top 5, and I'll give it to you from slightly different categories so they don't tread over each other.
Okay.
So you guys
Okay.
probably remember this. My favorite animated film is The Iron Giant.
Ooh, that's a good one.
The Iron Giant.
Based. That is correct.
Love that
Oh
movie.
my gosh, that is correct.
Now-
Yep, okay.
Into the Spider-Verse gave it a run for its money. I loved Into the Spider-Verse.
Fair enough.
So honorable
That's
mention
one
there.
of yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite live action that's been in like recent years, like recent live action film that I've loved. That's a tough one. That's really tough. Oh no, that's easy actually. I lied. Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I knew it.
Yeah.
That movie is
It's so good.
We'll do one more. We'll do
Yeah.
3. How's that? And then
Okay, yeah,
I
sounds
already
good.
gave you my nostalgia pick, the one from when I was a kid, The Great Escape.
Yeah.
The Great Escape.
Yeah.
I watched that one with my dad when I was young, and I just have the fondest memories. And it's not a happy ending movie. And I think that was one of the movies that kind of informed what I like about movies. I remember watching it and watching the ending and being like, oh, this isn't a happy ending. I really like
Yeah.
this.
I definitely remember my first time watching like a movie with like a fairly sad ending. I believe it was The Prestige with Christopher Nolan.
Oh, that's
which
great.
does not have. It's an amazing film, but it does not have a happy ending. I
No.
mean, somewhat happy ending, bittersweet, and it stuck with me.
It's a satisfying ending, but it's not happy.
I have one more question before we get into weekly films, and my last question at least, was what do you think about the current state of film and streaming and all that sort of stuff?
You want me to wax poetic for a minute? I can do that.
Yeah.
Let's see. The current state. That's tough. I think really interestingly, something unique has happened recently with both Everything Everywhere All at Once and Top Gun 2. Completely
Yeah.
different films and
Yeah.
remarkable for completely different reasons, but they're interesting. And I think every once in a while, a film comes along and I don't know if it's the stars aligning, but it kind of just nails the zeitgeist of what people are feeling, especially here in American culture again. And I think Everything Everywhere All at Once actually really, really nailed what a lot of people are feeling. This sense of, man, wouldn't it be cool to have an alternate timeline where I could see, like, I don't know, it's such a resonating between all the video games that have been coming out recently that have hit that theme, and, the multiverse with Marvel ending and
Yeah.
Like
that
some
idea.
sort of
Everyone rushing to do a multiverse.
Right.
Yeah.
or like some sort of escapism, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isekai and anime, right? Like, call it this idea what you will. And it
Yeah.
nailed it. It nailed it. It's the perfect film for that. And I don't know if there's going to be another one that'll do better than it for a long, long time. And if there is, I'll be super happy about it. And then,
That's a great way to look at it.
on the other side of the spectrum, you have Top Gun 2, which hit a completely different zeitgeist. Which to me, the zeitgeist is that of the nostalgic boomer, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not just the nostalgic boomer that's also still entertaining for everyone else.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
catch-all
I never
film.
saw Top Gun 2, but the most impressive thing about that movie is it got my dad and my grandpa to, like, care about movies,
Yeah.
right? Because my dad never goes to the theater.
Right.
By the way, my dad always listens. Hi, Dad. But he never goes to the theater, but he went and saw Top Gun, like, the first day it was out.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause he was like, I want to see it. And my grandpa, I think, saw it, like, 3 or 4 times. He put up some Kaden Batman numbers.
Yeah.
And, like, I was impressed, and I never saw it, but I didn't hear a bad review for it. Everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, I work at a theater, and we got rid of it for, I think, maybe 2 days at the most, and then they told us bring
Yeah.
it back because they want it. And I kept getting phone calls while it was gone. It was only gone for 2 days of people being like, "Hey, where's Top Gun? You guys got rid of Top Gun." By this point, Top Gun has been showing for months.
insane.
So it's insane how people are still seeing it.
It was crazy because it had been showing for months, and our biggest showings, like, almost always sold out completely of that shows, even months after, and we were astounded by it.
Yeah.
Because we had never seen that.
This is kind of my point. For the current state of film, I think Top Gun 2 and I think Everything Everywhere All at Once are going to be extremely influential for what studios are going to try to do for the next 5 and probably 10 years.
I agree, yeah.
Because they happen right after this pandemic, and they've got legs, man. They've got legs.
So I think we should move on to movies we saw this week. So McKenna, did you see any movies this week?
No, actually, I don't think I did.
None?
However, I finished watching Our Flag Means Death. Have you guys seen that?
Yes. I love that show.
I have not.
I haven't even heard of it.
It's a comedy. I don't remember exactly who it was made by specifically, but I do know Taika Waititi was a very big part of it, because he's one of the main actors. He directed the first episode, and it has lots of his comedy.
All right, I'll tuck that one away. That sounds interesting.
It's like Pirates. It's pretty good. And then some like romance and stuff in there. And that's pretty much what I've seen this whole week.
I didn't watch too much. I watched 2 different movies. One called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. It's a new horror movie by A24.
Oh yeah.
What Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is, it's basically Scream, but not the new Scream, the old Scream, but more for our generation, I guess. It's very much a satire on our generation, which is kind of nice. And then the other film that I watched was School of Rock, the one with Jack Black, who's
Good
amazing. Jack Black's amazing. One thing, I did not know it was made by Richard Linklater, who I love as a director. I've only seen a few other of his films, mainly the Before trilogy with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, which is one of the best trilogies of all time. And I just think it's so funny that he can go from like these amazing critically like movies that should have won Oscars, but I don't remember if they did, and then go to this like really fun stuff like with Dazed and Confused and with School of Rock, which is still really good. And they're just tons of fun.
Side note, I just remembered you guys were talking about Happy Feet in one of the previous episodes. George Miller,
Yeah.
the director of Happy Feet,
Yes.
directed
This is my favorite
all
fact. I love
of
this.
the Mad Max films.
Yes, and you know what's even funnier? So Mad Max Fury Road obviously won like a bunch of Oscars,
Love that
right?
movie.
One of my favorites of all time. But George Miller did not get any Oscars from Mad Max Fury Road.
Mm-hmm.
The only Oscar that he has ever won himself was from Happy
for
Feet
Happy
winning Best
Feet.
Animated. Which is just heartbreaking.
The wonderful
Mad Max is
irony.
so good. Yeah.
Anyway, you saying a director that bounces back and forth, that made me think of that. And I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah. You seen any, McGregor?
This week, let's see. Let me give you the TV answer. I love Survivor.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Everyone's got to have their guilty pleasure, I guess.
And let me tell you why. As far as trash reality TV goes, this is the pinnacle trash reality TV. It's the best.
It's either that or The Bachelor.
And The Bachelor's up there. I'm convinced Survivor's better. That's my opinion. And let me tell you why. It's the ultimate social experiment. That right now, everyone who plays the game, everyone who signs up for it, they know it's a game. Right? Mm-hmm. Early Survivor, it was a bunch of people like, I'm just going to go out on an island and hope I live and maybe I'll win $1 million. Now, everyone who goes there, they are playing. They are cutthroat. Yeah. It's so much fun. Been watching some Survivor this week, so there's a short answer.
Yeah.
Anything you've watched recently, Kaden?
The only movie that I've seen this week was I went and saw the new Dragon Ball movie, Dragon Ball Super Superhero, which should win an award for worst title. And it was actually really good. Like, I just expected it to be, silly, goofy. The animation in this one was really good because it's 3D animated, but animated, like, drawn to look like the anime art style, and it actually works really well.
Okay.
But yeah, that's all I've really seen.
Oh, I just remembered. My girlfriend and I, we watched George of the Jungle.
Nice.
No way!
But it wasn't even because you guys mentioned it. We had watched it before, and then you said in the last episode, George of the Jungle, and I was like, I watched that.
Yeah.
Some things didn't age very well at all, but when it hits, it hits.
Yeah. I think it's time for the movie of the week. You picked There Will Be Blood.
I sure did.
Do we want to start with the synopsis or?
Yeah. Let's start with the synopsis. First, we have our protagonist, Daniel Plainsview. He wants to find oil. Well, Paul Dano comes to him, and he's like, hey, I have oil up in my family's place. So pretty much, the film is about him getting oil, but he kind of backstabs the family in a way, and the family's like super religious. Oh, and then there's Paul Dano's brother, which is also Paul Dano, which I didn't...
Paul Dano too.
I didn't know that at first. So when Eli first came on screen, Eli first came on screen, I was like, that's a miniature Paul Dano. How did they get someone to look so much like Paul Dano?
They got him again.
And then I was like, it's just Paul Dano again. Anyways,
It's just him again.
Eli's super religious and is like, join religion. And then he's like, no, I have a boy. And I don't know. That's all really.
Me boy, me son,
Me boy.
me boy.
McKenna, that was a pretty good summary of the non-spoilery bits of the film. I am curious if the other two of you, Bailey, Kaden, if either of you have something where you're like, but what about this too? I want to see if you guys want to add anything.
I would just say, personally, it's like kind of like a specifically American tragedy.
All right, so I like those
Okay,
synopses. Those are good.
Yeah.
I think a couple things I want to add. One small correction, McKenna. At the very beginning of the film, he's actually mining for silver and gold all by himself.
Oh.
He's down the hole. He's working all by himself, and he's looking for silver and gold. And one of the things that Paul Thomas Anderson does well in this film and in his other films is that he doesn't beat you over the head with what's happening in the film. You really have to pay attention. And I think the other thing that's interesting too is that the film doesn't judge the characters. The film just shows you the characters and allows you to judge them.
Yeah.
So, importantly, also in that scene, first of all, I guess before I get to that, really quickly, what do you guys think of the soundtrack of this film?
I made a note about this. It was like so unique and really good. Isn't it like it was by? I watched a couple videos. Isn't it by like the guy from Radiohead? Is it Radiohead? Or is it something else?
I think I don't remember his name. Isn't it Johnny Green something, I believe. I don't remember.
Greenwood. And is it Johnny?
Johnny Greenwood.
I'm not sure, but Greenwood for sure.
Or maybe it's John Greenwood. Anyways, I love this man because he did two of my favorite scores from last year, that being one from The Power of the Dog, which, by the way, this movie reminded me a lot of.
Yeah,
they are very similar, like, kind of critiques on Westerns, I guess, kind of, a little bit. And then he also did the score for one of my favorite movies last year in general, that being Spencer, the one with Kristen Stewart.
Yeah. Spencer's still on my list. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to. The reason I bring up the soundtrack, though, and yes, you're right, it is one of the members of Radiohead. But the thing that I love about the soundtrack in this film is that it doesn't play like a soundtrack. It plays like a horror film that only barely makes you uneasy, at most.
I actually have a couple notes about it, yeah. One of my notes I took was that it made me think about like the sort of Oscar-y type movies as a whole, where you don't think about their score as much, but this one actually was like, ooh, this is unique and really good. And one of my favorite things the score did was it would carry over from scene to scene in the same song that were like scenes at completely different times. I was like, that's something you never see, but it was really cool and unique.
And incredibly effective. I agree, yeah.
Johnny Greenwood is definitely really good at making a movie that doesn't seem like it would be kind of like an uneasy film to watch into a very uneasy film to watch.
Yeah. In addition to what I said earlier, I think the thing that I love the most about the soundtrack is that this film is one of the only that I can think of that it would work for. And it works so well, I think, because this film is an uneasy film. You are on the edge of, these characters are deep and they are flawed, and I'm here for it. And the soundtrack really, really, really conveys that exceptionally well.
Yep, especially when his son goes deaf and just that constant banging. That's especially when I heard it.
Yes.
I loved when he went
It's
deaf.
really
It
good.
didn't tell you for a little bit, but like it implied it because it made like the ringing sound,
And the muffling.
and you could just go, "Ooh, I think I get what's about to happen." Yeah.
Yeah, the ringing.
Again, the movie doesn't beat you over the head. It lets you figure it out.
My issue with it is while some of the scenes just felt a bit too confusing. Like some of the scenes I didn't get when I watched them. Like specifically the beach, right? Like I didn't fully get what was happening there. My brain was like, "Oh, is this is this fella gay? Is that what this is telling me?" Like that was genuinely what I thought the scene was describing. But so then I was like, "No, that can't be it. That can't be it." So I went and I Googled it, and it was like, "Oh no, that's when he realizes it."
Yeah. My mild take is that Daniel Plainview is asexual.
That's fair. That makes sense,
Yeah.
honestly. Yeah.
He only cares about the oil.
Yeah, and money. And here's my quick summary of Daniel Plainview as a character. The only thing he's interested in, and he essentially tells you this in the film, he tells his brother, quotes, he tells Henry this, his only thing he cares about is dominating other people. That's what he's about.
That's one thing I definitely noticed is how much he loves to have control over both the situation and over lots of people, which is why I definitely think bringing up parts of the themes of this movie, it's definitely why he doesn't interact well with Eli, a very religious man, because lots of people of religion believe that everything is set in a path for them, or like their blessings are from God, while Daniel Plainview is a very man-made person. Like he built himself up, and so he doesn't want to be like, "Oh yeah, no, I was given this." No, he wants to be like, "Yes, no,
Yeah.
I'm the one who gave this to myself."
And to be fair, he did.
Oh yeah, he absolutely did, yes. But I think that's why he clashes.
Yeah, agreed. And for other reasons too. I would love to talk more about the relationship between those two characters because it's the most important relationship in the film in my book. So before we go too far though, McKenna, I want to hear your take on what you think about Daniel Plainview, or if you feel like we've said enough already, I want to hear what you have to think about a different character.
Yeah, I think Daniel Plainview is an absolute. He's a villain of this story. It's really interesting. But I think I'd like to talk a little bit about Eli, because Eli reminds me just of pretty much any. He reminds me a lot of Andrew Garfield's character in The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Pretty much, they're both kind of like this idea where they are the hand of God, pretty much, and they will tell you what you need to do, what you need to do to have the Savior's love, what to do to be saved and stuff. And it's just kind of like that manipulation, and if you're religious, I'm sorry, but kind of just like that manipulation that he uses with those people in the church, especially that old lady. In that moment, I was like, does he have a hand fetish? What's going on? But with that...
To me, Elijah, or Eli, I should say, Eli and Daniel, the two main characters by my estimation, are essentially the same person, actually. Not quite the same person, but
just
I would definitely like to.
different sides of the same
if
coin,
you'd elaborate on that, I'd like to know.
I'd love to. So, more of the synopsis. So, Daniel Plainview finds oil. He starts these small oil mining operations, but he's not able to make money because, as it turns out at the time, the shipping costs for oil were incredibly high. So, he's making pennies on the dollar for the product he's putting out, and he's pissed about it.
Yeah.
So, out of nowhere, this guy comes to his office essentially and says, "Hey, I know where oil is." And this is Paul Dano, but he's playing a character named Paul. So this guy shows up, Paul, and he's like, "Hey, will you buy information from me?" And Daniel like a good businessman, which is to say someone who's manipulative and will cheat people out of money, tries to get him tries to get him to admit information so that he doesn't have to give him any money. And one of my favorite lines from the character, he says, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't think I was stupid." So the scene changes where Daniel Day-Lewis essentially gives up. He's like, all right, fine. I'm not going to be able to manipulate. He tries multiple times, and Paul turns out to be too quick on his feet to let anything go. And so they agree, and he ends up paying him $500. He tells him the information. And another favorite part of mine, he says, if I go out there and I find that out that you've lied to me, I will track you down, I will find you, and I will bury you. Is that okay with you? And Paul goes, that's okay with me. So he pays him $500. They get the information. They go off, and they meet Eli, like McKenna said, like was talking about, and they find the oil and they start drilling it. So now we have these two characters, and I'm going to talk about the scene where Eli and Daniel Day-Lewis meet each other for the first time, which is they're out hunting quail, in air quotes, because, again, Daniel Day-Lewis is a smart guy, Daniel Plainview. He is trying to deceive the people that live there. He's trying to get a deal. The dad doesn't know this, the, old bumbling father, pretty effete, powerless character. But Paul Dano, who is now Eli, does know this. So he goes out there, you're hunting quail, huh? Daniel Lewis, that's right. And they're trying to pull information out of each other, right? And this is the point in the film where it becomes at least apparent to me that these two characters are as smart as each other. They understand each other. They know what each one is trying to accomplish. And they go about it in different ways. Yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis goes about it through capitalist means. Money is his power. Power is his power. Whereas Eli uses religion as his power.
Yeah. And I think, because I was talking about The Eyes of Tammy Faye, I looked up the guy, the televangelist, evangelist. It was Jim Baker. But pretty much the same thing with Paul and him is that they built their empire of, religion and stuff based on gathering all these people and telling them all this stuff. Pretty much the same thing that Paul did with having a bunch of people telling them that they can he can heal them and everything. And that just reminded me a lot of the actual events that have happened.
Yeah. Again, since this film, I view this film as being, in its own way, very critical of religion.
It's critical of religion and capitalism at the same time.
Both.
Which is so fun.
So this is just a great movie.
And critical of the relationship between capitalism and religion.
Yeah.
But
the reason I say that it's especially critical of religion is because, and I'm going to try and draw this parallel quickly. We have the scene, I've abandoned my boy, which is, we'll talk about it, one of the scenes where Daniel is being honest with himself out loud for one of the first times that we see. There's a couple times it happens, and that's one of them. Directly paralleled with the end of the film when he makes Eli do the same thing, and you can see it in Eli. Paul Dano, what a great actor. He does the same thing. He admits he's a fraud and that he's not, and he's false prophet, and the same thing happens, and you can see he's admitting something out loud he's never admitted before, and he understands himself that this is true to him. At least that's what I get out of the film.
I loved the parallels between those two.
And that's
scenes.
what I mean.
I know
they're the same character.
In my head, it was kind of like Daniel had kind of internalized that, and he's like, I'm gonna he thought about how he was forced to go and testify at the church, and he's like, I'm gonna get him back one of these days. When I reveal it, I'm gonna get his ass with this one. And he did. He got his ass with that one.
So that's what I mean, is the film is especially critical because it takes its main, most devout character, and at the end of the film it says, this guy is also full of shit. Yeah. And he knows it too.
It breaks the facade, and it's he knows, but he won't ever admit it. Or he does, but...
So, I think for the remainder of the podcast, I'm not trying to be critical of religion. I'm taking what the film puts out for religion, and we're trying to analyze it. So, if you are religious, believe me, I am not trying to put you down, or any religion down for that matter.
Yes, if anything, we're talking about some of the flaws that people take of religion.
Exactly. People who manipulate it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
which it's the same thing that people can do with capitalism, with Daniel Plainview.
It's a really interesting kind of dichotomy. Now that I'm thinking about it more, it makes a lot more sense like thinking about the movie as a whole, as a comparison of religion versus capitalism.
Yeah.
Oh, so I wanted to mention something. One of my favorite parts of the movie was the boy. I think
HW.
HW. Yeah, because I thought of George Bush. But for the chunk of time that we see him the longest, that actor, this is the only thing he's ever been in.
The young boy, or the older version of him?
The young boy, because
The young boy. Okay.
he's not even an actor.
The young boy. Only thing he's ever been
he's not
in.
even an actor.
Like, I actually read something about it where I guess like his mom pulled over Paul Anderson and was like, "Hey, my son's an actor. You should give him a role." And Paul was like, "Okay."
Yeah, they filmed by a school or something, and he goes to that school, and his mom was like, "You should put my child in here."
My boy. And then he like crushed it. Like he was insanely good. And then he just went, "You know what? One and done." He straight up Harper lead it. He's
Very
like, "I'm going to
good.
do one. It's going to do great. I'm out. Never going to be bad. Never going to mess it up." Like he did really good.
And I think another really interesting relationship that must be examined if you're going to do this film justice is the relationship between Daniel and his son.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I guess we'll have to get
'Cause-
to. Because
Oh, that was the spoiler.
why I got
The fact that
spoiled
his
too.
son is adopted. That was the spoiler that I saw in the synopsis.
Yeah.
It was like, in his adopted son, and I'm like, his what?
Huh?
Like, it made me mad because like that would have been such a good reveal for me if I didn't know
to be
it.
fair, the film doesn't hide it from you. Like
No,
if
it
you're
doesn't.
if you're paying
Yeah.
attention, you
Like,
figure
if-
it out in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're not paying attention at the end when it is revealed, if it surprises you as much as it surprises HW himself, then yeah, that's a big reveal. So, but hold on, to go back to Bailey, you asked me, okay, talk more about the connection between the two of them being essentially the same person. I see them just that, as the same person, Eli and Daniel, except that Daniel is ever so slightly more savvy by the end of the film. He figures it out a little bit quicker than Eli does.
I think there's a little bit of a difference as well with what they're willing to put up with, because as you see throughout the film, every single time someone I guess disses Daniel, I couldn't think of another word, or like steps in place and is like, this is what you should do, he gets super mad and is like very furious almost. And then every single time that that Daniel steps in over Eli, he doesn't have that physical power able to do it as much as he does with other people. So it's kind of like, I guess they are more similar, and it's just one has more power than the other, so he's able to step over him more.
Perhaps so. I think another thing to add to that is that that's still another part of capitalism versus religion, where you have Eli, who must appear pious, who must appear humble in order for his followers, in order for his power to work. He must have the followers who follow him, and they have to believe that he is who he says he is. Whereas Daniel doesn't have to do anything. He just has to pay people a crap ton of money, and he has
That's
power over
fair.
them.
Yeah.
He dominates people through
Never
capitalism.
realized that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my short version. I mean, I could wax poetic about those two characters for quite a while.
Yeah.
Daniel Plainview
cool.
lies
Really
the entire movie. And he says
that's really cool.
anything that will give him the power to dominate the other person in that exact moment.
Which,
Because
if
he's
I may,
good
I just,
at analyzing people.
Which, if I may, I actually just realized something.
Yeah.
Which how he lies the entire movie, and then when he finds out that somebody else is lying, both times that he actually finds out that someone else has
Yeah.
lied to him, he kills them
kills them.
immediately after.
Yeah, he murdered. Yeah.
I mean, he always knew that Eli
I did
was
not-
lying,
by
but
the
when he
way-
admitted it.
They
But yeah,
existed, and they did.
Daniel lies the whole movie, and you see it even better when you watch it the second time, the third time.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant earlier, is keeping track of when Daniel is being honest and when Daniel's lying. And I think one of the interesting, most fitting things is that we, as the audience, are the only one that's capable of seeing that. No character in the film is capable of seeing it. Not really. Maybe HW, except he's too young to figure it out. And by the time he does figure it out, it's because his dad's
Too late.
literally telling him to his face.
I definitely think we can touch on that relationship that those two have as well a little bit, because
The scene where HW came back to the house to like tell his dad that he was leaving was another really like impactful scene. Like the way Daniel just kind of no holds barred, just like yells at him. He's like, you know what, screw you. And like earlier in the movie, he like felt the remorse for, you know, abandoning his child, but now he just does not care.
Because I think the difference in between him and him abandoning his child and HW, quote unquote, abandoning him is that one is his choice, and so he feels that remorse of what he's done rather than of what this other person has done. Because that's one thing Daniel is very touching back on his need for control again is how much. And back on when he lies versus when other people lie to him, it's this contrast of where he's able to do something and it's completely fine. Maybe he'll feel remorse.
Well, I want to throw this out here real quick. I don't mean to cut you off because I want to hear the rest. But quick thought. So my girlfriend is a therapist, which is super fun to watch films with her when they have good characters, because she has awesome insights into human psychology. And one thing that she pointed out was, one of the most typical human behaviors is to hate the thing that we hate about ourselves.
Yeah, okay.
So Daniel, this is an example of what could be true. Daniel lies all the time. And we know that Daniel hates himself. We know that. At least, well, I think so, at least. And the fact that he sees other people lie to him and he's so enraged by it is, to me, another indicator that, he resents himself for who he is.
So there's a lot of really good lines in this movie. Like, one of my favorite aspects of this whole movie is Daniel Day-Lewis. No other actor could do this role. Like, I think he can do the, like, almost silliness of the role with complete seriousness and have it be serious. Like, no one else can call someone a bastard from a basket like 30 times and, like, make it sound serious
and make you think that that's a real person saying that to the real son that they actually love and they actually hate both together at the same time.
Exactly. And like the whole end scene in the bowling alley, like nobody else could do that. Like that's Daniel owned that. Like that whole
Very
thing.
true.
That was like his. He took over it and he just ran away with it.
This is a film where if you can't get the right lead actor, the film does not work, because it's about him. It's just about him. I mean, it's not.
Yep.
There's very few other roles that I could say the same thing about. Ironically enough, I would say Anton Chigurh from No Country
Even though
for
he's
Old
a
Men is
supporting
another
actor.
one
Yeah,
that-
interesting. But I agree.
Yeah, I still think that's one of the actors you couldn't
Agreed.
replace.
And then do you have anything to say about it, McKenna?
Can we talk about Milkshake?
We can talk about Milkshake.
Yeah. Okay.
Talk about
You know what? I want to do one thing and then we'll do Milkshake. Is that okay? Because
Yeah,
I
go
remembered what my comment with him and his son is. And it's essentially what I just said, which is that it's really interesting to observe Daniel and his son because he very clearly loves HW, unlike anyone else in the entire film, in his entire relationship, as we know.
I wanted to make a little counter to what you said about HW being the one thing he loves. I don't think he likes HW. I think he likes what HW helps him get.
You're right.
Right? Because I think he
That's
even explains
true.
it where he has him there to just have the sort of family man image. And I don't think he likes having a son or having a boy. I think he likes that the boy makes him more money. And that's why he's sad that when he abandons the boy. And like, I think it's less about liking another person and more about liking that person generates.
I'm going to push
money.
back.
I personally think it's a
I
bit
think you're
of
wrong.
both.
I think that he does, in fact, love his son.
fair
And
enough.
let me tell you why. He doesn't have that type of relationship with anyone else in the film, right? We don't see him kind of do that buddy-buddy. Remember, right before the final scene when he goes downstairs to the bowling room, right after HW walks out, it does a flashback. And it shows him at the well, and he's like, it's this really weird scene in a good way, where he's like pushing his son around. His son, like, HW holds out the hat and then like takes it back, and Daniel's like annoyed at him slightly, but then he like grabs the hat and he's smiling and puts it on, and you can't quite tell if he's performing or not, which is different
That's a good point.
than all the other times when you can very clearly tell that he's performing. And then, of course, he leaves his son and walks towards the well in a very fitting, and anyway, I truly believe he loves his son, and that's the only reason he can be so cruel to him at the end. How could you be so cruel to someone that you didn't feel strongly for? He loves that boy, but he doesn't know what to do with the love once his son becomes ineffectual. He can't use his son, to your point, Kaden, for what he always wanted to use it for, and he doesn't know what to do anymore, which is why he abandons him. And then he feels guilty, and he doesn't know what to do with the guilt because he can't do anything with it, so it turns into hate, which is also love.
Yeah,
I personally think, I would like to touch on a bit of both, actually. Because one, obviously, he did start out using HW as like this, look at this cute face, he'll help me get money and stuff.
He admits it.
I think over time he does grow and love him. At least he loves him part ways, part not. And then one thing that makes him realize how much he loves him is one, when he abandons him, you see one single tear drop from his face. And that's that's one single tear drop from his face as he's leaving him to be, and that's the one of the biggest shows of sadness emotion that I think he shows in the entire movie. But I also think he uses him as a saving grace for himself, because when he gets rid of him, when he gets rid of HW, he kind of becomes this darker person, honestly, and that's what ends up killing Henry. Or that's when he ends up killing Henry, and when he abandons him in the second time, at the very end of the film, he ends up going and killing Eli as well. So I definitely think HW is both part of the oil business that he wants to keep going and stuff, but it's part of him as a family man that he also doesn't know what to do with, because he knows it's a lie, partially at least, but he also wants to show this boy love and stuff. It's very complicated, which is honestly one of the best parts of the film, is how complicated it is.
I think that is the best part of this movie is the characters. And I mean, obviously, one character specifically being Daniel, but I think the characters are really what make this movie.
And let me throw out one more thing before we get to the milkshake.
Yes, before we let McKenna go off on the milkshake.
In addition to that, what I'll point out, I feel strongly that what Daniel really needs, he doesn't want it, but he needs it, is someone that he can connect with. And that's what HW is going to be for him eventually, until it can't be anymore because of the accident. And so he doesn't know what to do with his son. He sends his son away only after he's met his fake brother, who he doesn't know is fake. And he gets another person who he feels like he can actually connect to, even though he doesn't want to. Yeah. Sends his son away, which, by the way, when the son sets the bed on fire, you guys remember that? Do you know why?
Yeah.
He's reading the diary in one of the earlier scenes. He knows that Henry is lying and tries to kill.
I didn't realize that.
Okay. Yeah.
Another interesting point. But he sends his son away, and then he kills Henry. Which, by the way, one of my favorite scenes is when Henry is telling him, "You don't have to kill me. I'll just leave." And it's a one long take on his face, and then it cuts and shows Daniel's face, and it's just rage personified. The look in his eye. That's my favorite shot in the entire film.
Yeah.
But he kills Henry, right? And in pure rage and in pure, loathing over how could someone... And then he brings his son back. Because, again, I think that the thing that Daniel needs but doesn't realize is that he needs someone to connect to. But he can't do it because of who he is. He can't help it.
All right, McKenna, you seem eager to talk about the milkshake.
Milkshake. Okay, first off, when he was talking about milkshakes, it totally took me off guard because I didn't know this milkshake scene was from this movie. But I remember going to Megaplex theaters and stuff, and it showing up beforehand. I was like, oh, this is the milkshake scene. But they were talking about milkshakes, and I'm like, why are they talking about milkshakes? And then it just hit me. I was like, hold on. The pipes are the straws, and the milkshake's the oil. But not only that, is that it also is a battle of wits in that scene. Because earlier we see how Eli is being like, I'm not stupid. I'm smarter than you. I'm going to make it so that you do whatever I want. And then Daniel's like, I'm not stupid, and I'm going to do what I want. And then just the realization of Eli realizing that Daniel totally messed him up because he has no more oil or anything. Beautiful. And the acting, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole scene, I want to say that that's my favorite scene in the movie, but it's just barely beaten out by when the oil rig thing explodes.
Hard to beat.
Because
that was beautiful.
The way some of my favorite line from that is, "Why are you miserable? there's
We're
oil
standing
out
on
there.
a lake of
Like,
oil, or an ocean of oil.
an ocean of oil. And I was like, that is a good ass line, because people are like his son is like messed up for life in the other room. Everyone is like panicking for their lives, and he's just like, this is pretty cool. I guess, like, yeah, like he's just like, this is great. This is great for money.
This is
Business
the
booming.
turning point for Daniel. This is where he becomes the thing he's been
Yes.
threatening to become, not to anyone except the audience.
I think my favorite scene in the film is possibly the milkshake scene, and if not, then it's the I've abandoned my child, only because the only reason those two are so close is because they work so well together. One being Eli getting back at Daniel for this entire time of abuse and using him, and then finally, even though Eli doesn't really use Daniel at all throughout, I mean, he does use him at some points, but not nearly as much as Daniel does for Eli. But throughout the rest of the film, Eli leaves Daniel alone, and then Daniel never forgets that. So he turns it back on him and uses it towards him and humiliates him, bullies him, and then,
The reason I like the milkshake scene too is because when we first see Daniel, he's passed out on the floor, drunk or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Eli comes in, obviously proving that he has all the power in this scene, coming over to him, kneeling over him, being like, the house is on fire, trying to scare him and stuff.
The smugness,
And then it slowly, the power in the scene slowly shifts because Daniel gets the power, and in the end, he's standing over Eli and is like, yeah, I did it.
Ooh.
Oh.
Laying on
Who's
the ground.
also
at the bowling
slumped
alley.
over
That's
on the
good.
ground.
I would point out as well that I think you're exactly right, except that Eli never had the power. He just hasn't realized it yet.
Yeah.
He just doesn't
And he
know.
thinks
And he
he has
thinks
it,
he
but he
does,
doesn't.
which is what's so fun and interesting.
Yeah. One thing I really like about the bowling alley milkshake scene is when Daniel starts like chasing after him, when he like knocks over the bucket of water and it
then
hits
it
the
splashes
camera.
on the camera.
That was
Really
that
cool.
was so cool. Like
I love-
it takes you out of it because it's like, oh, did not
I
expect
love
that.
when
That's kinda scary.
when stuff in the movie interacts with the camera. Like
I love that.
especially in horror movies when there's a kill or something like that. Lots of the times blood will hit the camera and splash onto it. It's my favorite sort of thing.
It was just because that whole scene, I was just sitting there absolutely flabbergasted, just gobsmacked that this was all about to go down. Like, there's a couple of comments on the video of that scene on YouTube where it's like, it's a shame that they really just let Daniel Day-Lewis just kill Paul Dano like that. That's a shame. Like, because the joke is that he was so dedicated to method acting that he just snapped when he started throwing bowling pins at him, which, is pretty funny.
Don't bully me, Daniel.
Before... Don't bully. That was so funny. But before I realized it, before he started like beating him over the head with the pin, I rewinded it 10 seconds. I'm like, did he hit him in the back or the head? Like, is he just hurt or is he like knocked out? Yeah, he's knocked out and then he dies very, very shortly after.
This whole movie, I was like, why is this rated R? And then the last scene, I'm like, oh,
And
that's
then
why.
you find out.
I think another interesting thing is that Eli, is consistently, over and over, treats Daniel as though they're old friends in the final scene. Which to me, I assumed at the beginning of the scene, the second time that I've watched it, because it's been a while, I assumed that he was still up with his facade. I thought he was, doing the whole facade thing. But having watched it a second time, I'm convinced that Eli actually thought of Daniel as his friend for some reason. And I don't... one thing I'm not sure why he would think that. I'm going to have to watch it again.
Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense, though, yeah.
Don't bully me, Daniel. Would you say that to someone who you didn't think of, right?
Daniel, stop it! It's me. Eli, you're pitiful. But yeah, he really does act like old friends, and that's a good point, because from Eli's first introduction to Daniel, he's trying to just like almost be buddies with him, but then it becomes this sort of power creep. Like the scene where he asks if he can give a speech at like the start of the oil thing, and Daniel's like, "Yeah, dude, absolutely," and then just doesn't. Like that. I don't know what's special about that.
Daniel Plainview does not
Like,
give up power.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
what
it. Yep.
that's what Eli was trying to do, right? Because here's the classic example from history. The Pope goes to King Henry and says, I will crown you king. And King Henry says, screw you. I'm going to make my own religion to not let you do it because I will not give up power. Will not kneel to you. And Daniel Plainview does the exact same thing to Eli. He won't do it. He won't do it. He does it himself. He won't give up power.
This is just a really good movie all around.
It is.
I like, after this, I think if I rewatched it, I would retroactively give it 5 stars rather than 4.5.
I think so,
because
too.
I do think there's a lot of things I didn't realize, a lot of nuances.
I have 2 more thoughts.
Yes, let's
The
hear
first
it.
of the 2 is the incredible use of violence in the film, where not necessarily inflicted by one person to the other. For example, at the very beginning, when one of his workers gets the pipe to the head, and it just happens, and it's over in a matter of seconds, which is what violence is like in real life often, right? The film is so grounded in what violence is actually like. That's part of what makes it so uneasy, is because the film lets you know right away, listen, bad things will happen in this film, and they will happen out of nowhere. You better be on your toes. And then it follows through on it.
Yeah.
It follows through on it all the way to the end. The use of violence is so grounded when he kills Henry, when he kills, when the second guy dies in the second, when he kills Paul Dano, right? Every single time violence happens, it's quick, and then it's done.
It's brutal.
And it's brutal.
Yeah. And it's,
And I really appreciate it about the film. One of the things that really makes it
very true
successful.
And there was B blood.
There was B blood.
There was B blood.
I guess another thought, I have one middle one, which is I have always thought of the title of the film, There Will Be Blood. I thought of it as a promise to the audience. The one time where you really, really, really see it and the camera lingers on the dead body, because it does not do it for the other deaths, right?
No, it is like a quick
It barely
snap
shows
to
it.
the other.
But on the final death, it lingers and it really says, there it is. Look at it. There's the blood. I told you.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's my opinion.
Told
I
you.
don't know if that's actually true, but
that's a very fair one.
No, I looked it up, and I think it's a biblical reference. I think it's like a reference to
That
some
wouldn't
Bible
surprise me.
verse.
I thought
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
thought it was about the oil, like there will be blood, because oil's like the blood
The
of the
blood
earth,
of
I
the
guess.
land.
Yeah.
Sure.
So like
Yeah,
there will be blood. He's finding the blood.
I like that interpretation. I have one final thing for us to discuss, which is the final line of the movie. Perhaps my favorite final line of a movie of all time, which is where the butler comes down and he sees Daniel Plainview lying, or sitting there, and he says, sir, or whatever, are you all right? And we get a little pause, and Daniel's facing away from the camera and goes, I'm finished. More silence.
Yes.
Cue the strings. Roll credits. Incredible ending. And I want to know what you guys think. What is the way that the audience should interpret what Daniel says? That is to say, I'm finished. What does he mean by that? That's what I want to know from you guys, because this is the question that you get a million different answers from a million different people. And they're all interesting.
I think it means that he has finished his mission pretty much. He has gotten all this oil, he has built an empire, and he has destroyed pretty much the thing that would deny him. That's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
That's cool. That's pretty good. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. I think it means his goal is finished. Because his goal was to, like, after meeting Eli and all that, his goal was to just get back at him. And also, be filthy rich. And when he finally ends it all, he's finished. He's accomplished everything he wants. He's done it. Finished. And, yeah, I mean, the other thought I had was that he's and this is probably my least favorite explanation of it, is that he's finished in terms of, like, as a person. It's like, I'm done
that's the
for.
boring
I'm
one.
finished.
It's not necessarily wrong,
that's the
but
lame
it's not
one.
interesting.
It's the least interesting, but yeah. Yeah, you go off.
I think I mostly agree with you, Kaden, where he's or at least he's finished his goal. But I think it's more of this moral war that he set himself on with Eli, kind of. And he's like, he's finally finished with this revenge that he's probably been wanting for a while, I bet, for the humiliation that he received at the I've abandoned my child scene. I think it's just finally him being like, I finally won, I'm done. Kind of like that.
Okay. Here's mine.
Do you have any specific way of looking at it?
I've got a
McGregor?
couple. Here's the one that I've been thinking about after watching it the second time, which is the question that I'm going to ask rhetorically. What does it take to become a billionaire? And the rhetorical answer, without thinking about it too much, to me is either you inherit a whole ton of money, or you, like Daniel Plainview does in this film, manipulate and exploit other people in order to get as much money as possible, right? You lie, you cheat, you steal, and you can become maybe not a billionaire, but certainly very, very, very rich. And an interesting take on this film, and I don't mean to compare them directly because I don't think that this is a fair comparison to these people, but I think there's some interesting ideas if you compare Daniel Plainview to a person like Elon Musk, to a person like Jeff Bezos, to a person like Mark Zuckerberg, right? The visible billionaires that we have modernly. And what does it take to be a person like that? Well, you have to be willing to cause incredible harm, violence, and even death to other people, if not directly, indirectly, and just not care. It takes an incredible amount of, I only care about myself. This drive to dominate, this drive to not see anyone else succeed, right? It's really
losing a lot of humanity as well.
And the other, and then leading up to him being, I'm finished, I think one of the most interesting observations with Daniel is the change in him from the last time skip, from when his son and his future wife are young to when we time skip to them getting married. The change we see in Daniel from this, bitter but successful man to what is essentially a husk of a person who is filled with nothing but resentment and bitterness towards the people who he hates for whatever reason he feels like hating them. And to me, I'm finished at the end is a nice summation of, well, I'm not sure if there's anything left for me to do. I think I've done everything. I've gotten my revenge for everything I can think of. I've made my riches. And now, what else is there to live for? Which is paralleled by his conversation with the oil guy in the very middle part of the thing where he says, if I sell to you, what would I do with my life? And the guy's like, I don't know. What would you do with your life? And I think Daniel's sincerely asking the guy, one rich person to another, no, really, what am I going to do? If not do what I've always done and exploit people and grind. And he finally gets there at the end of the film.
For sure. Yeah. Overall, this is just a really, really, really good movie, honestly.
Well, I think that about wraps it up.
We need to pick the movie for next week.
It is my pick. And the movie next week is Beetlejuice, 1988.
Good choice.
Ooh, Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
I told a couple people about that's going to be the next movie, and they're like, you should have waited till Halloween. And I'm like, I have a couple other movies ready for Halloween time. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Mr. McGregor. It's very cool.
You.
Yes, thank you,
This
Mr.
was so
McGregor.
fun. This was so much fun.
We'll definitely want to have you back.
Yes.
Maybe for one of the horror movies in October, I'll have you come back. Are you passionate about The Thing, perhaps?
Now here's the thing about The Thing. I know about The Thing. I know too much about The Thing for my own good because I have not seen it. So maybe you guys can wax poetic to me and show me a thing or two. I would love that.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and see you next week. Don't forget to watch Beetlejuice.
Yep, thank you.
I'm finished.